The first of these films is a studio movie called Memoirs of an Invisible Man, in which Chevy Chase turns invisible after an accident and is chased by the CIA while trying to maintain his connection with his love interest, a kind of comedic version of The Invisible Man. Carpenter was disappointed with the final product, saying Warner Brothers was simply interested in making audience-friendly, non-challenging movies, and yes, it is lightweight. It does have a clinical 90s studio film feel about it, but it is a decent film. It lacks the heart of Starman, despite being similar in story setup, but it was quite entertaining. I found a lot of the jokes landed well, and the special effects in achieving the invisibility and everything that goes with it was superb. It's not a bad movie by any means. Light, as I said, inoffensive, and not a game changer in any sense of the word, but a decent chase film. After this, Carpenter worked on the project Body Bags, which is a kind of Creepshow style film having 3 different short films which are presented by the coroner, played by Carpenter. It was originally a TV show pilot that failed, so they made it into a movie. Tobe Hooper directed one of these shorts and Carpenter did the other 2. I don't remember much of it, but I remember liking it. The first movie, if I remember correctly, was about a lady working at a nighttime service station, which can often be a spooky and dangerous place where you have all sorts of weirdos turn up from the highway. She ends up getting stalked by some dude. This is vintage Carpenter, in which he creates a scary story from the simplest of premises. There's one shot I remember of the main character in the forefront, and the bad guy who you think has snuffed it gets up and slowly starts walking towards her with the music pulsating from behind her. That scene would send Halloween fans over the edge because it's a clear homage. The second one is a goofy comedic short where a middle-aged man with long hair has a fear of going bald and decides to try out a new experimental scientific method. It's pretty funny and light, but ends up in a wild and disturbing place. Then Carpenter made In the Mouth of Madness, a homage title to Lovecraft's work, where an investigator explores the enigmatic figure of writer Sutter Kane. This is a much respected late output from Carpenter among the horror communities, and this has made me consider a rewatch, but I didn't think much of it. For one, though it was well made, well shot, and well acted, it didn't have the usual aesthetics of John Carpenter's movies, and its story, although ambitious, when delving into the meta aspects, it got quite messy and started to trip up over its own feet. I felt the movie was trying to be too clever for its own good. It was a departure from the usual Carpenter fare. He was trying something new, which is something I praised him for earlier. The horror here is more surreal, and there are philosophical questions being pondered, but it was quite dull though, and when it all kicks off in the end, we only get a blink and you'll miss it glimpse at the monsters in the movie. Carpenter's next flick, The Village of the Damned remake, clearly highlighted the traction of the director's ongoing fatigue. This is one of the few films he's made that I flat out didn't like full stop, mainly because it lacks the Carpenter feel. Similar to In the Mouth of Madness, it doesn't have his trademark flourish, his instantly recognizable touch. The movie starts off interestingly enough. I haven't seen the original, so the plot was intriguing. A strange, unexplained entity arrives at a small town and suddenly everyone falls asleep. When they wake up, all the women are pregnant. They end up giving birth to these weird aliens posing as children. It's interesting, I guess, in the sense that the weird Carpenter horror entities this time are in the form of innocent, or apparently innocent, children. But to be perfectly honest, this movie felt so lightweight, so utter devoid of horror, and it was left gasping for something to pick it up, something to give it a reason to keep going. It was just so boring, so stale feeling and wooden. It felt like Carpenter was going through the motions, and contains very little of significance that offers any memorability. Now, my opinion on Carpenter's next few films might have you questioning my sanity. A sequel to Escape from New York was always talked about, and by the time it was made, Carpenter was creatively and physically exhausted. The result was Escape from LA, which is more or less a remake of New York in a way, in which the rugged Pliskin is sent to recover a doomsday device from LA, now a prison island. This is a much laughed at sequel, and rightfully so. It is an insult to those who waited for a sequel to New York for years and years. Here's the thing, I wasn't one of those people, because New York was before my time. I watched LA, the parody of New York, on TV, and truth be told, I had a blast. It was terrific. It was so cheesy, so outdated, so audacious. You've got the entire budget used up in the first 10 minutes with some decent earthquakes, and we end up in an insane world where Kurt Russell rides a tsunami wave in order to chase Steve Buscemi, who's evading him on four wheels, high-fiving his partner along the way. It's so entertaining but so dumb, like the scene where Snake has to make an impossible basketball shot in a problematic time frame. The characters were actually quite cool, in a goofy way, Bruce Campbell's freakish plastic surgeon being one of the more notables. This is the kind of movie that we're told we have to hate, that we need to stick our noses up at, lest we become outcasts in movie-going cliques. But deep down, we all knew seeing Kurt Russell and a transsexual Pam Grier pounce down in gliders, shooting up an amusement park is just what we needed to see. The ending is so B-movie galore and ballsy as well, a great climax to one of the more batshit films you'll see. Snake is back, baby. I've always appreciated vampires. It deconstructs the romance associated with the creatures and instead is quite a gruff and violent film, full of crude profanity and sweat that makes you feel kind of dirty and in need of a shower after seeing it. Out of all of Carpenter's later works, it's probably the closest to his heyday, at least in terms of his trademark aesthetic. But there is the added element of the movie being loud, nasty and rude, which is a departure from his usual cool and charming films. The movie has a really nasty feel. It feels hateful, like it was made with venom. The characters aren't particularly likable, and I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. Would I see it again? Probably not. But it wasn't exactly a bad movie. It just feels like it came a bit late when you see films like The Lost Boys, which are able to make vampires scary, but also spread comedy into the mix. Vampires is quite a simple film, macho and harsh. But where Kurt Russell might have gave the camera a quick wink wink, James Wood's stoic lips remain uncurled and unsmiling. Carpenter's music was good fun, and there is a strange appeal to the film. It seems to be modelled on Western tropes, which is nice I guess, since Carpenter was a big fan of many Westerns but never actually made one. I would have liked to see what Carpenter would have done though with vampires in his prime. By the way, did anyone notice that vampires had this really weird shot transition where it would have this fade effect? Very strange and slightly distracting, especially since it makes you quite sleepy. Ghost of Mars. Now, this was the big one, wasn't it? The time Carpenter jumped the shark, drank the Kool-Aid or whatever else you want to say about it. And say what you want about it, because Ghost of Mars is awesome. Fight me. Like Escape from LA, it's so horrendously cheesy, so ridiculously unfortunate in its creative decisions. It's so damn stupid, but it's an absolute riot. There's a group of police officers in the 22nd Century Mars, including Pam Grier and Jason Statham, who have to pick up a dangerous criminal played by Ice Cube, who in my headcanon I like to think is supposed to be Russell Snake Plissken, but get caught up by some weird Martian race who end up hunting them down. Interestingly, the film seems to encompass various elements from the classic Carpenter movies, like a creepy fog, aliens which assimilate people, and characters held up against a massive horde. I read on IMDb trivia that the main Martian bad guy, Big Daddy, ad-libbed his dialogue. Yeah, no shit, whenever the camera finds him, he's literally screaming, "What the hell? What is that supposed to be?" And Ice Cube's desperate attempts at being cool, scrunching up his face, the weird narrative with flashbacks within flashbacks within flashbacks, the cheesy ending which seemingly finished in the middle of the story, and the fact that this expensive film looks like it was shot on some low-budget B-movie set in the 60s. As they say, give Carpenter $500,000 and he'll make your film look like it was made for $3 million. Give him $50 million and he'll still ensure it looks like it was made for $3 million. I can't believe they had almost $30 million to play with, and yet the film turned out the way it did. That being said, remember what I said about Big Trouble in Little China having a special kind of magic? Ghost of Mars has its own magic. It's probably a jug full of cocaine, but still, if you enjoy a film, you enjoy it. And I had a blast watching this flick. The acting is horrible, and the bad guys look like the filmmakers picked up hobos off the street. And you'll ask yourself during the movie, why is everything red? I can't explain it, it's an enigma. I like it though. The worst sin a film can commit is being boring, and the worst Carpenter movies like Village of the Damned are the ones that are boring. Ghost of Mars, for all its faults, is definitely not a boring film. Which can't be said exactly for his last picture, The Ward, which marked his return from a 9-year absence from cinema. He directed 2 TV episodes of Masters of Horror, one being Cigarette Burns, which I've seen, and it was great, so he still had the talent. But The Ward makes you question whether he should just stick to playing his video games and shouldn't have bothered returning to film, because though The Ward is, definitely watchable, it lacks Carpenter's magic and is painfully cliched. It's like Carpenter's stuck in some time warp, unable to move on, where he hasn't realised that the elements of The Ward have been done to death. Truth be told, we wouldn't look twice at The Ward had it not had Carpenter's name attached to it. There are no decent ideas, no genuine scares. It feels like a knockoff, and it's sad in a way that Carpenter seemingly became content with making run-of-the-mill average cookie-cutter horror fare. So many of his movies, even the weird ones like Ghost of Mars, stick out for being different, being unique, but there's nothing unique about this film. It's not terrible, but it's just there. It exists, nothing more. There's no snap, nothing is memorable, no scene, no characters. Okay, the last scene got me, but that's about it. The movie relies on tried and tested formulas that by this point had become stale, and it needed someone with vigour, not a burnt out Carpenter, to steer it.